Hello, grade 1 students. My name is Laura and I work for the Lesser Slave Lake Bird Observatory. Today I want to take you on a virtual tour of the banding lab and show you how our scientists study the birds of the Boreal Forest. So before we go on our virtual tour, we need to talk about what exactly makes a bird a bird. Birds have some body parts that are different from us humans. What body parts does a bird have that you do not have? Can you find 3 things that are different? The first body parts that we'll talk about are wings. So humans have 2 arms, but birds have 2 wings instead. And most birds use their wings to fly. Take a look at this wing from a snowy owl. When a snowy owl flies, they make no sound. That helps them sneak up on their supper. The second thing that birds have that we don't are feathers. Birds have feathers to keep them warm and help them fly. Finally, the third body part that a bird has that is different from us is a beak. We have noses and mouths, but birds have beaks instead. Different birds have different beaks depending on what foods they like to eat. Birds like the pine grosbeak have big, strong beaks that they use to break through hard food like nuts and seeds. Warblers have sharp, pointy beaks for eating insects. And birds of prey like hawks have very sharp beaks for eating meat. Birds also lay eggs. A baby bird grows and develops inside an egg that its mother lays in a nest in the spring. Birds also have some of the same body parts that we do, but theirs might look different from ours. Birds have 2 feet just like us, but a bird's feet will look different depending on where they live. Birds that live in the water, like ducks, have webbed feet, which act like paddles to help them swim. Bald eagles have sharp talons for catching prey. Songbirds like the common redpoll are sometimes called perching birds because their feet help them perch on branches in the forest. Finally, birds have 2 eyes just like we do. Some birds, like owls, have very large eyes on the front of their head so they can look for prey. Other birds, like the ovenbird, have their eyes on the sides of their head so they can watch out for predators. Now that we know what a bird is, why is it important that we learn about them? By studying the different birds in our forest, we can determine which ones are healthy and which ones might be in trouble. We can also learn a lot about where the birds in the forest go for the winter, which is called migration. Most songbirds spend the winters in a tropical place down south, but travel back to the boreal forest in the spring to take advantage of all the yummy insects and wide open spaces. The boreal forest is a great place to claim a territory, find a mate, and start a family if you're a bird. Why do some birds migrate and leave the forest in the wintertime? First of all, it's just too cold for some birds. Many of the songbirds that we see in the forest in the summer aren't used to our super cold winters. Also, many birds like to eat insects, fish, or drink the nectar from flowers. When the ground is frozen in the winter, there are no insects flying around or flowers growing, which means no food for birds. Instead, most songbirds fly south for the winter.
How exactly do we study birds? Simply looking for birds and writing down what they see is a very important part of a scientist's job. They use binoculars to look at and count the birds they see in the sky, swimming in the lake, or perched in trees. A few of the songbirds that pass by will be caught by our scientists so they can study them more closely. And that brings us to bird banding.
But what exactly does bird banding mean? Our scientists set up large nets in the forest to catch songbirds while they are migrating in the spring and fall. Once they catch a bird, they attach a metal band to its leg, they take some measurements to learn more about the bird, and then they set it free. So the whole process is very quick and doesn't hurt the bird at all. Our scientists set up soft nets that are hard for the birds to see, so they get caught when they fly into them. Next, our scientist carefully takes the bird out of the net and puts it in a cloth bag on her wrist. Then she takes the birds to the banding lab. This is Robin. She's our top scientist at the Bird Observatory, and she's also called the bander in charge. She helps make sure that all of the birds are safe while getting banded. First of all, they need to know what kind of bird it is. We band very small birds like warblers, medium-sized birds like robins, and sometimes even larger birds like sharp-shinned hawks. Next, is the bird a boy or a girl? Here are 2 magnolia warblers. One is a boy and one is a girl. Which which one is the boy? Can you point to it? The boy is the bird on the left and the girl is on the right. How do we know? In some kinds of birds, the boys and girls look very different from each other, so it's easy to tell them apart. The boys have very bright, colorful feathers to attract the girls so they can start a family. The girls have duller, more drab feathers so they can camouflage themselves in the forest while they're sitting on eggs in the nest. Next, we need to learn how old the bird is by stretching out its wings and looking at its feathers. Young or juvenile birds are more camouflaged while they are babies because they need to hide from predators while they're learning to fly. When they grow up and become adults, they'll have the same brilliant colors as their parents. Next, the scientist blows on the bird's belly to see how much muscle and fat they have. The bird is strong and healthy if it has a lot of muscle and a lot of fat. We're nearly done. Next, we use a small ruler to measure the length of the bird's wing. Finally, we see how much the bird weighs by putting them in a tiny tube on a scale. Then we let them go. The whole process takes only a few minutes so the birds can carry on with the rest of their day. Learning about birds in the Boreal Forest can be really exciting and really challenging. I am so excited to come to your school to do a field trip so you can see what it's like to be a bird scientist. I'm going to end today's presentation with a short little video from the banding lab. See if you can spot Robin in the video. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.
Bird banding entails putting a little band around their leg. And the idea is that we're catching these birds, putting bands on their legs, and that marks them as an individual.
These are our bird bands here. We have different sizes for different size bird legs. And each of these has a unique 9-digit number. So no other bird banded in North or South America will have this band number. So it's basically like giving them a social insurance number. That way, if they're ever encountered by us or by somebody else along their migration route or their stopover or their wintering grounds, we can track its movement. The bands are lightweight aluminum, so they don't affect the bird's flight at all. We have 14 nets set up and we use passive trapping.
The nets are about 12 meters long by 2 meters high, and they're just strung through the forest. They're very hard for the birds to see. Birds are just naturally flying through the forest and getting caught. We're not using lures, we're not using any calls, any feed, anything like that. Every half an hour we're checking the nets, bringing any bird we've caught into the lab to process them. And then while we are banding them, we take a lot more information about each bird. We're taking wing length, we're also taking the condition of their feathers, and we're taking fat and muscle content of the bird, and that just gives us an idea of the overall health and condition of the population. We also take the age and sex of the birds. It's important to get as much useful scientific information as possible. I mean, you can see that the tips look worn off on all of these. 24.5. It usually takes 1 to 2 minutes, and then they are on their way and no worse for wear.